Transmaxxing often occurs when incels groom each other into becoming femboys and then grooming those femboys into fully transitioning into women. They're only attracted to femboys because it's the closest thing to a woman they can get. They'll encourage them to transition and tell them how much better their life will be as a woman because they're desperate for female attention, they want a girlfriend, and are lonely. They can shape them into being the perfect traditional woman, teach and manipulate them into becoming their fantasy. Because they hate women so much, they would rather create their own who can be fully manipulated. There's a clear difference between men who are naturally attracted to trans women and incels who would never be with a trans woman or a femboy if they were socially powerful. But by total lack of options, they've adapted their mindset to see this situation in a positive light. Many of them hate women so much, they begin to see this as actually a better option, even though they are more physically attracted to women. They'll convince themselves it's better because they don't have to worry about pregnancy, or they're easier to manipulate and less judgmental. Trans women and femboys have less social capital, and that's very attractive to them because they wish women were beneath them in society, but incels never feel that way. Many men are naturally attracted to trans women 100%, and I'm not stigmatizing that. And there's a clear difference between trans women and femboys. However, I'm trying to point out that there are men who will get with femboys who genuinely are not attracted to men, or will get with trans women even if they wouldn't in a perfect world.
If your FYP is anything like mine, you've been hearing the term incel, you've been hearing the term transmaxing, and you might be like, WTF? Because if you're anything like me, I'm like, what is this stuff? And so I went over to Chat GPT and asked it to break an incel down for me and break down what transmaxing is. And I thought we could have a conversation about this. I am not an expert. Y'all gonna have to go to the search and find the people that really know their stuff about this. But it's so intriguing and it's so crazy. Not crazy, it's wild, right? So an incel is involuntarily celibate, and I guess in different online communities they have these chats, and you can go on Reddit also. They have these communities basically that are incel communities where it's the guys that nobody wants, right? It's the dudes that have never had a girlfriend, they've never had sex, girls are not interested in them, and so they're involuntarily celibate, or they're an incel. Okay, you clock it? And then in some of these communities, it goes as far as, let me go back, hold on. Okay, so in these incel communities, they go as far as telling people or suggesting that people go into transmaxing, which is, they consider it to be a life hack where they transition into being a woman, not necessarily because they're transgender and they believe they were born into the wrong body, but it's supposed to be a life hack because they feel like women have it easier. And if they transition into being a woman, it's they've unlocked some kind of cheat code to life. It's wild. So now you have the incel community recommending or encouraging people going into this whole transmaxing space and becoming or transitioning into being a woman as a strategy, and not so much because they believe that we're born in the wrong body. I don't know what is happening. And this is me just explaining it from ChatGPT. Y'all gonna have to do your own research, but this is wild. Am I the only one that's what?
Story time about how I got fired from a school I was working at that had an Epstein cabin because my coworker was transmaxing. This is a story I honestly thought I would never tell or the internet would ever be ready to hear, but with how the term transmaxing is popularized recently, I don't think there's ever gonna be a more appropriate time for me to tell this story. Reasons I cannot name the institution, but you can use that first fun fact. And I was working at a boarding school and I was a child caretaker, and that's very serious at a boarding school because I'm not just a child caretaker, I'm their legal guardian. Even if their parents wanted to see them, they would still have to check out with me and show ID. I got a new coworker one school year who said they were trans and that they were going by, let's say, the name Lisa. A very short, Traditional female name. Lisa was obsessed with video games. Lisa had a very rich and affluent family who owned a lake house very close to campus. Lisa quickly starts befriending a lot of my female coworkers and inviting them over to the lake house, saying that they want help with their transition process and that they also need girls to come over for sleepovers to help them figure out makeup and hair. The female coworkers who took up Lisa on this offer never really said what happened and would suddenly stop talking to Lisa. Lisa also ended up with one of my students from the year before who was trans. This student was very, very low maintenance and very chill. So I was surprised to hear that this student asked for a new caretaker assignment. So I check in on the kid. As a caretaker, you're supposed to do room inspections just to make sure the building's clean and that there's just a general health and safety. But the rules are, of course, you can't just enter a student's room without their knowledge or their consent. You should have a stable, steady time that the kids expect you to be knocking on their doors, waiting for consent to enter, and you should never be entering if a student says not to. I asked my former student about what happened, and they mentioned that Lisa didn't have these protocols. My former student, being trans, was actually assigned a private residence. That way they could have privacy for their own gender affirming procedures. They explained they were actually shirtless at the time, enjoying the privacy of their room, when Lisa came in for another random room check. My former student shared with me that this was the second time that Lisa came in for a random room check without warning the students a day before through email or having a standardized time for room inspection. And it was the second time that Lisa had entered the room when my former student had yelled, "Do not enter," when they were not fully clothed. My former student also shared with me that because they're so far in their transition process, the boys in their hallway had no idea that they were trans and are now accusing him of being transphobic for calling out the predatory behavior that he had to undergo. So if you know me, you know I'm pissed. I'm livid. And I start going down the rabbit hole because I'm pragmatic, I'm an educator, and I know I can't just run in here with claims that the institution's already apparently addressed, and decided the solution was to simply move the kid and not address the predator. At this point, Lisa had started inviting me to their house for these slumber parties, and every time they would do the same thing. They would invite me over, claim that it was for girl stuff, claim that it was to help them transition, and every single time they would go into full incel gamer mode, get super drunk, and then claim they couldn't drive home at the end of the night. I was in a long distance relationship at the time, so girl, whatever or not, I'm bi. Out of respect for my relationship, I would just stay in one of the rooms in the house with the door locked. I began to wonder what happened to my female coworkers who also hanged out with them who mysteriously stopped. So I went back to them and I finally asked them, "Hey, whatever happened with you and Lisa?" And that's when I learned the unfortunate truth about Lisa. And I start to understand what this term transmaxing is. Lisa was inviting people over under the guise of, help me with my transition, help me learn girl stuff, using their transition as a way to connect with women to get their safety and trust. And then once they were alone in the house, they would push themselves on these women as a man. Several of my coworkers admitting that they were actually raped by Lisa fully as a man. They felt so embarrassed, so ashamed, so uncomfortable. They still had to work with them with kids. They didn't know what to do. I'm horrified not only for my own safety, my coworkers, my students, the community that I fostered over the last few years. So I gather all the testimonials and I send the information to the president of this institution, who has been the president of this institution for some years for the boarding school and the summer camp version. I don't get a response from the president. Instead, I get this really weird, eerie energy from all of the administrators the next day. I go through all of my meetings, then I'm called into the dean's office and told that I have to sign the papers on the table that said confidential termination paperwork. I can't even tell you what's in the papers. When I even tried to walk away and even talk to my supervisor in this moment, I was stopped by the head of campus safety who was hiding behind a darkened doorway, dead ass, and said, "If you move another foot, you will be arrested for trespassing. You are now considered a trespasser of this campus." So that's how I learned the unfortunate truth of transmaxing from real personal experience. They fired me and they simply asked that person to leave with multiple allegations, which I should have known, because even when I was hired at that institution, I noticed some of the students that I was brought in to work with, they seemed a little shaken up. They seemed to have signs of PTSD. And when I asked the students I originally got when I got to that institution, how are they feeling once they got comfortable with me, they shared with me that the person who worked there before me was a predator, and that they had also specifically preyed on the young queer students at this art school. I say all of this to say this is happening a lot in art spaces. This is happening a lot in education specifically. There's a lot of young queer men in the arts, and unfortunately these people that are transmaxing know where you are and they know how to get access to you. Lisa never got banned from the campus. I did. And then Lisa, when their students turned 18, came right back to campus when the kids were there working there over the summer and wanted to invite them to the lake house to go smoke and drink for 4th of July. And I said, literally, the fuck you are. I gathered up every single fucking kid myself and said, I don't give a shit if you drink. I don't give a shit if you smoke, but I'm gonna tell you what. If you're gonna act grown enough to do that, you need to be grown enough to know this person is not the appropriate person to be your friend, and no person over 25 should be a personal friend of someone who just turned 18. If you notice someone who's much older than you, offering you goods, giving you all the time in the world, don't think it's because you're so special. Think it's because they're so creepy.
You wanna know who's a transmaxer? I feel very comfortable saying it now, is the motherfucker who be eating food, and the waiter, the server will come up to them and be like, hello, sir. And they're like, I'm a woman. That is a transmaxer. That is your biggest example of transmaxing. And let's go into it further. White men who are excluded from the alpha male culture in the white community go straight to this. They go straight into the alt-right red pipeline. I swear to God. Because, how do I explain this? White men who are excluded from alpha male communities and are the low level males in the white culture, they look for power in social hierarchy in other ways, right? And we can see that on the biggest scale, which is America right now. Like, think about all the rural, poor white men in America and how many rich white men in America there are. There's like 10 and they got all the money. But a rural white man is not going to understand that. He's going to blame all the minorities for him not becoming an alpha male when it comes to money. You get what I'm saying? So when they're excluded from this, they look for other people to hate, which is I feel like it's very self-explanatory, right? But that is when you bring in the transmaxing, right? So transmaxing, if you don't really understand it right now, this is an easy definition, I feel like. White men think it's funny and think it's beneficial to present themselves as women or act as women would do. When they go to places and they use these benefits of being a trans or a woman, which is just like, someone holding the fucking door for you, something they created. When they do those things, it's a joke to them, right? Now you got some of them. Now this is not all of them because I can't speak for them. Now you have some of them who literally want to be transmaxers because they can exude power over men. It changes the social hierarchy in that dynamic. When it becomes to like you're being desired and you're being chased, that's what they want. And they want that desire, that sexual power over men. I'm actually always so disappointed and just upset how many black and brown creators are coming out. Like, I didn't know Jeffrey was a alt-right red. I didn't know Jeffrey was red pill. I didn't know what the fuck are y'all talking about? That means like that's willful ignorance. You know that? Because I remember the shit that he said to Makeup by Shayla, and I'm not even that old. I'm 24. And I remember the shit that he said to Makeup by Shayla. He was telling black women to put battery acid on their face so that they lighten up. And then his PR was getting black lips for his lip line. Using black girls for his lip line. Then it was like, look how pigmented the colors are on her skin. That was his PR. He was racist. He's been racist. One thing about transmaxers and people who use women to maximize the benefits of their life, they know what it means to be a white man. They know what it means to have privilege, and they know what it means to have supremacy, and they demand it when they're dressed like that, for sure. They're a little cowardly as men, but as women, they feel completely comfortable exuding white supremacy. How many, last thing I'm gonna say, actually, I got one more thing. How many times have you seen a white trans male? Bitch, you're not finna do shit about it, and what? How many? Yeah, exactly, because they know they can exude power over everybody in that moment. Thank you very much. Y'all have a great day.